So, hello everyone. It's 12 o'clock, or in Finnish time, 11 o'clock, and we're going to start our humanitarian talk for today on uh, adult learning. Welcome. So, hello everyone. My name is Katja Mannerström. I'm the head of public affairs for FRC, the Finnish Refugee Council, and I warmly welcome you to our humanitarian talk of today. We're talking about functional adult literacy, especially in refugee context and humanitarian context. We, the Finnish Refugee Council, have been working with adult education in refugee and post-conflict settings for 30 years. And this session will focus on the crucial role of this education for adults, the ability to apply the skills for reading, writing, and written calculations to the requirements of daily life. The ability to read and write and count is crucial in building refugee self-reliance and sustainable livelihoods in this context. We will explore this theme with a set of experts for the next 45 minutes, and I will start by introducing our panelists. First, I will introduce Erdem Vardar, who is the founding director of Juva. Apart from being a full-time NGO executive, he's an activist and adult educator. And Juva has provided thousands of Syrian refugees in Turkey a host community members functional literacy education. Then I'll introduce Peter Paul Opata, my colleague from Uganda, working right now for the Finnish Refugee Council as a program manager, where he manages the country program projects implementing adult education and also soon to roll out climate smart agriculture interventions funded by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Finland. And he's also worked previously with our project for financial literacy training project funded by the World Food Programme. And lastly, Paula Malan works as a senior education advisor for the Finnish Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Finland. And she has over 10 years of experience supporting education sector development in Africa and Middle East, including with the UN and NGOs. And we'll start out with a question to Paula. Or actually, I'll just let you know that we also have Mariana Sal here today, and I'll introduce her later, but she will give us her closing remarks in the end. So Paula, let's talk about adult education. The Finnish government supports strongly implementing programs in education in emergencies. How do you see what is the role of adult education in emergencies?
Thank you for the question, Katja, and thank you for inviting me to this panel today. Like you said, obviously, adult education is about strengthening self-reliance and about supporting livelihoods. I also want to stress that in emergencies, access to information can be life-saving. For example, accessing information on child protection, sexual and gender-based violence, sexual and reproductive health and rights is a critical protection mechanism. And education is so important because it helps to strengthen the resilience of individuals so they can establish essential survival and coping mechanisms. I have worked myself in Palestine, for example, and over again in that context, education and the testimonies of people who were living in that context were that education really provides a future outlook. It provides hope, and hope is very important in a context where you are, for example, displaced. It reduces the kind of distress and strengthens your coping. Obviously, also the essential life skills that Katja already mentioned, functional literacy, the basic reading, writing, numeracy skills that you apply in everyday life are so important because then you can access that information that you need to help you protect from abuse and to be able, for example, to analyze information critically, to be able to recognize disinformation, propaganda, and so forth. And also I want to mention the importance of vocational and entrepreneurial skills. It's not only reading and writing that is important, but obviously refugees and adults in emergencies need to have a means for living, and they need to reduce their dependency on just humanitarian aid. Obviously, Finland supports education in emergencies as part of our humanitarian aid, and approximately 10% of our humanitarian aid is channeled to education programs. Education is also a very big priority in our global development policy and development cooperation. And we are very happy that we have been able to support, among others, adult literacy programs, for instance, implemented by the Finnish Refugee Council. And this is particularly important work to reach out to the most vulnerable persons, such as women and girls and persons with disabilities.
Thank you. Definitely. We'll probably talk about this gender issue more later, because women is definitely one of the key things to think about when we talk about adult education. Peter Paul, my colleague in Uganda, in the context of Uganda's refugee situation, how do you perceive the role of adult education in strengthening refugees' resilience there?
Thank you so much, Katya, for that question. And what an honor to be able to share a little bit of an experience this afternoon as well from our context in Uganda. Maybe just by very, very brief background, remember that Uganda hosts more than 1.5 million people, refugees. And out of these refugees, over the 1.5, nearly 60% of them come from South Sudan. And I'm making this reference because South Sudan is one of the countries in the world with the least levels of literacy. So in the context of adult education in Uganda, adult education therefore becomes a really critical component of strengthening refugee resilience to provide an opportunity for many youth, women, and grown men who have never had the opportunity to look at a blackboard, to be able to begin making sense out of what is it to count, for instance. Can you believe just having the ability to write one's name is such a liberating experience? And there are lots of these refugees who have not had the opportunity to know how to basically write a name, They are used to doing it, maybe using a thumbprint, but which they cannot even recognize when they come back next time. Would you prove this was your thumbprint? But once they learn how to hold a pen and begin to write their name, and they are able to get into communities and raise an opinion and listen to the discussions of what is going on and feel part and parcel of that conversation, that is a very liberating, sort of empowerment, which directly contributes to the resilience of these refugees. With adult education, other than indeed, as Paula mentioned, besides just learning how to read and write and count, they are also exposed to many other daily life impacting experiences, to be able to engage with those things, to be able to discuss, how to improve their own well-being in the household where they come from and of that of their community, how to ensure that their children's health is well taken care of. So all these pieces directly contribute to the refugees' resilience that they gain through adult education, for many of them who would have not had that opportunity. I hope that provides some sneak peek of how I perceive that adult education is actually a life-saving opportunity for many refugees who have not had the opportunity, and hopefully they're able to pick a bit of these skills even when they return home or when they are relocated, to be able to actually connect to those new contexts and communities where they go to.
Thank you, Peter Paul. Very, very important points, and especially the resilience of the adult also also the children and the family gains from that. You highlighted this, um, the importance to understand, for example, health issues or something with your child, that the adult is also, the well-being of the adult is also very much in correlation with the family and children and well-being of the whole community. Thank you. Then we have Erdem. You have been working mostly with Syrian refugees in urban settings, or your NGO. How do you see the role of this kind of non-formal education for adults in that context?
Yeah, thank you, Katya. Yes, since the beginning of the influx of Syrian refugees in 2011, we have been actively trying to provide adult education, but later on, actually, education for all. First in the border areas between Syria and Turkey, but then in the whole country, as the influx has penetrated the whole country in time. Currently, there are more than 4 million Syrian refugees in Turkey, and like approximately 1 million of these refugees are children. So we started to work with adults, but we had to work with children as well in the coming time. I mean, adult education, what we have provided, especially in the beginning, and we have believed so also according to needs analysis in many different settings as well, was the main priority was language, because the mother tongue of Syrian people is mostly Arabic, and in Turkey it is the Turkish. These are actually very different languages. Even the script is different. Turkish uses the Latin alphabet, and the Arabic uses the Arabic alphabet. So we try to first provide people with the skills to use practical language skills to get, I mean, to stay alive actually in the first months and years, because this was the only way you could get around where they arrived. Only a few percentage of the total population of Syrians were based in camps. This was, I think, at the most 250,000 people. In comparison to 4 million now, it is really not much. So most of the people actually have been living in urban settings and trying to cope with life only themselves. I mean, without really, any food or any other service being provided in the first months. So I mean, this is the main skill you need to really stay alive, for self-reliance, obviously, or to find to get any access to any services like education, health, or even find a job. So this was our priority, and we have seen that this was also very relevant in an emergency setting as well. Of course, the crisis has become a protracted crisis later on, but even in the emergency setting, this was crucial. And later on, we moved on from practical language skills to functional literacy, like writing and speaking and being able to attend the school, even a Turkish school for children, or vocational training, including language training or language skills which are needed to do any kind of vocation in Turkey. Maybe, I mean, for the first question, this could be enough. I can elaborate
Yes,
later.
let's talk later more about this. And I think this is a very, very interesting interesting discussion about what kind of different kind of obstacles or different kind of things you need to take in consideration when you teach adults and children? That might be one interesting question for you, Adam, later, about this what specificities there is in adult education. But let's move on a little bit to what we already a little bit talked about, women. Because when we talk about adult illiteracy, there's always this question about gender, because 2/3 of all the adults who are illiterate in the world are women, and approximately 40% of women living in the sub-Saharan area are illiterate. And then in the refugee situation, this is even worse, as also Peter Paul already talked about the South Sudanese refugees. Approximately 80% of South Sudanese women can't read or write. And of course, the refugee situations and all sorts of crises like COVID-19 pandemic, we've seen it hits harder on women and girls education. And these educational paths erupt even earlier. And well, Paula, young women, and when we talk about women and adult education, what one good thing would be maybe to talk when we talk about these adults, to remember that we talk about maybe 15-year-olds. Very young people are not able to go to kind of the formal education anymore. So we, for example, the FRC work a lot with very young people, even though we work with adult education. But young women are one of the major target groups for adult education. And what does this kind of non-formal basic education mean for the lives of young women?
Thanks, Katja. Yeah, obviously, I partially addressed this question already in my first remarks. Education is a critical protection mechanism, and it can really empower. It can increase opportunities for participation in decision making. It provides essential skills to take control of one's own life. And the situation that Peter talked about of the refugees coming from South Sudan in Uganda and Ethiopia, I just want to really highlight that in those contexts where women are extremely vulnerable to abuse. The UN just published a report this week, which is talking about the widespread and systematic rape being perpetrated by armed groups across South Sudan for women. I've been following the situation there for a while, and the stories that I hear from South Sudan are really heartbreaking. So really, these young women coming from such contexts, they need these coping mechanisms. They need the hope and the resilience that education can provide. Then about literacy, Peter also mentioned that there are these young women and girls who have never had formal opportunities to go to school. And obviously that's a big issue. Some years ago, I was actually teaching in Finland in a preparatory class for immigrant children, and we received children from Somalia, from Liberia, from different countries. For example, I remember a child whose mother from Liberia was not able to, she could hardly write her name, but it looked like a spelling of a first grader. And you can imagine how intimidated she was when I had to have a parent-teacher conference with her, ask her to fill forms, which were like in Finnish language, long complicated-looking forms. And then I had to tell her that this is where you write your name. And then she was somehow trying to type her name there, but obviously not understanding all this bureaucracy that she had to go through. So really, it's about integration into the host communities. Also, literacy is an essential skill. I want to highlight that there's also, like, in a big picture, there is positive development, or there are positive developments, although Katja mentioned that still so many young women and girls did not have the access to education. They don't know how to read and write. But looking at, for example, Afghanistan, in 2011, 17% of women were literate. In 2018, already 30% are. And when we think of the situation, for example, in the early 2000s, when the Taliban first took over, obviously female literacy was even lower than 17%. Hardly any girls had been going to school and were literate. It was very difficult for those women and girls to stand up for their rights. Now, when we have more than 30%, it's not good enough, only 30% are literate, but still, we have a growing number of young women and girls who are able to defend and stand up for their rights because they have access to information, they are literate. So this is very, very important, and that's why we need to continue supporting this kind of important work.
Thank you. Yes, and maybe I'll ask this next question directly to you. Like, you have been working also with the issue of people with disabilities in humanitarian situations, and this is something probably the most vulnerable people who are in need. What do you see? What kind of non-formal education in these humanitarian situations? What's the role for these kind of people who have disabilities and other vulnerabilities?
Indeed, if the situation for women and girls is dire, it is obviously more so for persons with disabilities and women and girls with disabilities. First of all, I want to note that disability inclusive humanitarian action is a big priority for Finland in our humanitarian policy. And disability inclusive education is a big priority in our education sector development cooperation. And this is exactly because this is where we see the greatest gaps are. We are still not doing enough. Humanitarian and development actors are still not doing enough to address the needs of persons with disabilities, who are obviously amongst the most vulnerable in such humanitarian situations, less likely to have had equal educational opportunities in the past, often overlooked or excluded, and even more vulnerable to abuse and violence. I think we do need a twin track approach. We need more specific targeted interventions for persons with disabilities in non-formal basic education programs, specifically targeting persons with disabilities, but also we need much more mainstreaming. We need to look at all the non-formal education programs and make sure they are designed in an inclusive manner. This requires, of course, looking at several barriers, the barriers to access. Why can't persons with disabilities get enrolled, or maybe barriers in physical access? And then we need to really look at how we can increase awareness and capacities of implementers, of trainers, of the communities, so that persons with disabilities have a better stake in these programs. But obviously very, very important.
Yes, and also very challenging, and it's great that this is something that we Finland wants to enhance. Then moving on to Peter Paul, financial literacy training. Tell me a little bit about your project there and what kind of significance it had on illiterate refugees. Also, if there is a kind of gender, you've seen the role for women and girls.
Thank you so much, Katya. And financial literacy for me is one of those subjects that has been extremely important, but also very exciting to engage and to discuss with the refugees. Now, again, just to give you a little bit of a context in order to locate how we got into this financial literacy training. So our refugees have traditionally been used to getting food. So they've been given food and they do not even think about where, how, how much it costs. I'm happy to have my 2 kilos of beans or grain and that's it. But because of many changes in the world currently, there is this massive move now to provide cash. And I think it is important because cash, the way it's provided currently, is non-conditional. So it's liberating. It gives you the opportunity to decide what you would like to do with that cash. Now, the downside was that lots of refugees, the excitement of just getting money, they did not think through the need to, this money is supposed to last this long or supposed to provide for these basic things. And that is what made the financial literacy training program extremely important. So what we did, or what we have been doing with this program, is that you take the refugees back to reflect on what is financial literacy. Many refugees with the connections or with families elsewhere may even have opportunity to receive extra or additional cash. But the concept of how do you manage that cash to ensure that you respond to the most critical needs of the household were not there. And that is the value that FRSC has been adding. You take the refugees to sit back and reflect. It is 5,000. I don't know what that means to some of you, but if you took a 5,000 Ugandan shilling, what is its equivalent in many other things? So once you put them through, 5,000 is able to buy a glass of alcohol, it's able to buy this X amount of sugar, it's able to take a child to get treatment for this, it's able to provide scholastic materials. Then financial literacy begins to really make sense. And many refugees have had to sit back and begin to think through planning for the resources that they have, and to budget and to prioritize. What is it that if we had the choice of 6 things, what are the 3 most critical things that we must prioritize to spend these resources that we have available to us? If we have to buy food, how much food can we be able to buy to take us X amount of time before we receive the next ration that is going to be given to us, or to the amount of money that will be given by a relative or whoever? That is the added advantage of financial literacy that has provided for these refugees, but also to enable them to think through just beyond here. The concept of saving, for instance, village saving and loan associations is not a new thing in many of our programs in general humanitarian response work. But I think the difference that FRSC has made or has given is that it trains the refugee first to appreciate the real time value of money, the advantage of saving. And it doesn't matter how much. It is the concept, that mindset change for the refugee to understand that it's important to save, however little. And why are you saving? You save for ABCD, for goals that are very, very clearly defined, that you don't put a goal that you cannot reach. You put goals that within this X amount of time, I'm actually able to pursue this and be able to see me growing towards that. That is what financial literacy has done to many of these refugees who initially never thought they would have the ability to provide for certain basic needs of their own, thinking, after all, the humanitarians are here, they should be giving us these things because we are, after all, disadvantaged by our circumstance. But our financial literacy training program has really opened up the minds of the refugee, and of course, some of the host communities that are participating as well in other forms, to think through the need to plan, to budget, to prioritize, and to involve family members, which brings me to the question of the involvement of women. Culturally, in most of Africa, perhaps even in the world, women never took very critical central decisions in determining the well-being of the house. The man provides and the woman prepares, processes. But now with the financial literacy training, we are actually saying, can a family sit down? Can you listen to every member of the household? Does the woman have an opinion to share? Does she have a contribution to make? And apparently in homesteads that have embraced this, they're actually living a slightly better life. perhaps even a happier life, because they're able to discuss beyond just the finances, but other social issues that affect or that impact their household. Anecdotal, studies are telling us, which is basically mostly observations and feedback through focus group discussions, that families that have been able to discuss financial issues are actually experiencing less violence, because now they agree on where to prioritize and to put the resources of the household. So again, in very brief, Katya, that is the quick response I can provide.
Thank you. Yes, and it's clear that kind of even this short course on how to use money, how to save, how to understand the money helps in this cash-based aid. Very, very interesting points. And now actually we only have last question for Erren because our time already went very fast. But you were talking about the refugees learning the host community language to understand and function in the urban setting, and also even like just to survive, because kind of the host community or the state is not giving that much and they need to survive, and the importance of that, and then also one of the questions in Turkey especially is also kind of the tensions between different groups of people of the host community and the refugees. How do you see, what kind of educational angles do you see in this to kind of also just to make the relations better between these groups?
Yeah, I mean, like speaking the host community's language is I think the very basic of any kind of social cohesion effort. It is very important in our context as well, because also like the Turkish population does not speak, like the majority does not speak any foreign language like English or any international language. So this means even if the refugee himself or herself speaks an international language, I mean, if you are in a small neighborhood, you wouldn't be able to communicate either. So there is no other way somehow than learning the language of the host community, and this changes a lot, because this makes communication possible, and communication really pulls down barriers and prejudices, etc. And this is really the first step, that you have a dialogue and you understand each other and you put aside the fears and prejudices. And of course, this having a language skill is even more important than having a vocational skill learned, let's say, in a way. It is we see as you are like having a language skill is mainly more than 60% of finding any I mean, you increase your chances more than 60% to find a job in the local market. And to be able to work is another, I think, a very important social cohesion measure in that sense, because then you start to be seen from the community side as a productive member of the community, not just sitting and taking, let's say, the taxes of the others who produce. So you become a producer yourself. And this also, I think, helps a lot, also being in an environment of work and getting socialized, getting out of your house. And yes, as I said, co-producing, communicating is very important. So this is how we see social cohesion. Of course, you can do many other events and using adult education as a tool. This is what we have tried to do also. You mentioned people with disabilities or women, etc. What we have done is to open community centers, which are open to both, let's say, not only the refugees, but also open for host community as well. So we tried to, for example, organize trainings. This could be kind of vocational, or it could be only like at a hobby based, which were open to both communities, women and people with disabilities. So this kind of events and also adult education measures are working as well to bring both sides together. We had pastry workshops, cooking workshops, even many other hobby-based or hand skill-based workshops, and these were also very helpful to bring all these sides together and to speak and to understand each other. And we have seen that many had very good time together and then became friends, etc. And these are I think, very important to create such learning safe spaces, so to say, that you are somehow a little bit moderated, that you come there to learn and to communicate and to socialize, rather than just to discuss why are you here, or why you came here, or why you should go back, etc. But I mean, the tensions, of course, I mean, what the NGOs or the international organizations and the Turkish government is trying to do is great. But on the other hand, of course, it is still a challenge, because I mean, the numbers are enormous. So even though, I mean, we have reached tens of thousands of people until now, it doesn't mean that we have reached the majority. So I mean, these efforts need to continue, and now it is a protracted crisis. Now the children are growing. The children who started, let's say, at a very, very early age to go to a Turkish school have grown up. Now we have become adolescents, etc., and they are already part of the society. So we hope that they will bring also like additional value for social cohesion, because now they are no different than a Turkish person in a way. They can speak very well Turkish, and they are very, some of them are really very successful at school. So yeah, the challenge continues, but I mean, I think this is the way to go.
Thank you, Erdem. Interesting talk. Thank you, everyone. Our time is up for you panelists. Thank you to all of our experts and everybody listening to our experts. And now we'll give the stage to Mariana Sal for closing remarks. Mariana Sal has been the Ambassador for Education at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Finland since 2019. And she has an extensive experience in Africa, having served 12 years at diplomatic positions, and plenty of more since '97 with the Finnish Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Welcome, Mariana Sal. The stage is yours.
Thank you. Thank you. It's I'm very happy to be here this afternoon. So good afternoon to you all. I think that education is a fundamental human right. It is an essential means to promote sustainable development, strengthen resilience, and empower individuals. In emergencies, it serves as critical protection mechanism. And we have spoken today about the importance of access to information, essential life skills, education and functional literacy, in particular for girls and women, as well as for persons with disabilities. For Finland, these are very important factors. We need to ensure that the rights of all girls and women and those in the most vulnerable positions, such as persons with disabilities, are protected and promoted in humanitarian action. In humanitarian crises, women and girls, especially those in vulnerable positions, are at heightened risk of sexual and gender-based violence. Access to education, including comprehensive sexual education, is key in reducing these risks and changing the behavior leading to abuses. Ensuring that education is available for everyone is crucial in realizing sexual and reproductive health and rights. Literacy is an extremely powerful tool that can have a transformational impact on an individual's life. That is why Finland has supported the Finnish Refugee Council's non-formal education and functional adult literacy programs for more than 20 years. And we are committed to continue supporting this important work. I want to highlight that in today's conflicts, functional literacy, including critical media literacy, is an essential skill which enables an individual to interpret information and recognize disinformation. We need these skills now more than ever to make informed decisions. Lastly, I want to highlight the importance of women's and girls' participation in decision-making at all levels, also in humanitarian crises. Education is an enabler which provides important skills and tools to increase women's full participation in decision-making. This is why education must be an integral part in resilience-building efforts in emergencies and protracted crises. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you very much, Marjana. And thank you everyone for listening, everyone who was virtually and also live on board for our talk on functional adult literacy. Hope you gained a lot from this discussion and also be in contact with these our experts who are available for more information. Thank you.